What's up, everybody? It's Andrew Schultz. Charlamagne's finishing something at the Breakfast Club right now, but this episode of The Brilliant Idiots is brought to you by Squarespace. In 2016, building the perfect, unique website for whatever you may need isn't a challenge. In fact, it's as easy as starting a free trial at squarespace.com, whether it's a blog, a store, a gallery, or just a place, a shrine for your own ego. All the tools you'll need to accomplish your interweb goals are included with your Squarespace website. Start that free trial right now by going to squarespace.com and entering the offer code IDIOT to get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace sets your website apart. Okay. Hey, Hesitation Tour coming to Jersey this Sunday, one night only, to the Stress Factory Comedy Club. Okay, it's in New Brunswick, New Jersey. I think that's near Rutgers. I don't know, but if you're from there, you probably know where it is. But come out to the show, one show only. I got some other shows coming up as well. I'm going to be in Boston the 7th and the 8th of October at Laugh Boston, okay? I'm going to be in New York City, NYC. I'm back. I do it once a year. Gotham Comedy Club, the 14th and the 15th of October, all right? The 20th, I'm at Methodist University. The 22nd to the probably 23rd, I'm at Zanies in Nashville. The 2nd of November, I'm at the Improv in Houston, Texas. Okay? The 16th of November, I'm at Mohawk Valley Community College in Utica, New York. All right? And then in the new year, I'm coming back to Philly, January 19th through 21st. I'll be there the whole weekend. I will see you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming out to the shows. Now, it's very important that I also note that we are going to come to LA for Brilliant Idiots Live. Okay? We're going to be part of the Now Hear This Festival. And if you love podcasts, you don't want to miss this thing. It's a really big podcasting festival coming out of Los Angeles area this October. Our show is the 29th. Okay? It's at 3:30. Or it's at 3 o'clock. Okay? Well, just look it up. Make sure you check it out on the website. They have passes for the whole festival. They have day passes. But make sure you cop that. We're coming out to the West Coast. It's our first time out there in the LA area. If you're in LA, San Diego, fucking Arizona, I don't know what other places around there, but roll through. Okay? Pull up. It's going to be freaky. And that's really all I have to say about that. I'm sitting here right now. We've been talking for the last probably hour because we're unprofessional. We get shit done super late over here. What time do we say we're going to start? What, 9:30? It's 10:15 in the morning, and I'm here with Camille Foster. Okay. I don't know how Fox. I guess I know you from Fox.
Yeah.
I hate that being your intro because immediately it triggers people. No, you don't care.
I'm fine triggering that.
I know you're comfortable, but I want to give people like a fair chance you.
I'm an entrepreneur. I do stuff in media, documentary, film production, and yes, I occasionally go talk on various cable news channels about a lot of political topics.
Okay.
Oftentimes it's Fox Business and Fox News. I hosted a show at Fox Business for about a year.
Right.
I'm not a conservative. Don't like Donald Trump, but they have me on and they allow me to say whatever the hell I want about any issue I care about.
Yeah.
And so long as that's the case, I go.
It's interesting that, I mean, I've always admired that about Fox News. And again, I have to like tread lightly when I say this because I understand what it triggers in people, right? They hear certain words and they just fucking shut down. That's just what, but like for me, anytime I've been on there, I haven't been on there to be sabotaged.
Yeah.
Right? Like whenever I watch CNN or like MSNBC or something like that, it seems like they bring on the Republican to literally sabotage them, right? They surround them like wolves. They can do that in News
Corp too. They don't do it to you. You go on the right shows. But I mean, there are certainly some shows where you show up and it's 2-on-1. You know what I mean? I've seen that happen.
Yeah. All right, bring it. If you know your shit, bring it.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so I see you on the show, and then there was a take. I forget what it was. I think it was we were in the green room. We were talking about Leslie Jones, and I think I asked you. I was like, "How do you feel about the Leslie Jones Twitter thing?" Right, and like people are so outraged that it was only happening to Leslie Jones. They're like, "This is so fucked up. That's only happening to Leslie Jones and none of the other characters." And your reaction was really funny to it. Your reaction was, "So what do you want? More nudes?" Like, would it make it fair if they just posted the nudes of ever? Is that equality? Is that
fine.
yeah,
Which is fine.
So I thought it was very interesting.
I would be the first to say yes. I stand with Leslie Jones. I think all women should release naked pictures of themselves. That way, this won't be such a big deal.
Yes.
She
Why
won't
are
have
we
to be
shaming you?
embarrassed. No.
Show your the second you're 18, you show your pussy to everybody in the world.
This is it. Yeah.
Then
It's
nobody has
Mardi Gras.
leverage.
It's Mardi Gras. The
Here's
world
another.
is Mardi Gras.
The other thing about the pussy, showing the pussy thing is like, there's no way. I guess you can judge the outside of the pussy, and sometimes they look whatever. But like, there's no way to judge the volume of a pussy, right? Like with a guy, there's fear of showing your dick because you're like, fuck. Then someone could have a bigger dick than me, and then they know they have a bigger dick than me, and I know, and then that can't win conversations or arguments with them anymore, right?
Yeah. My experience is quite limited.
With dicks.
No. Yes, with dicks. Also, I've got like a wife,
Right.
who I sleep with regularly.
So you've only seen
and I do not have a great deal of experience with which to say, oh, that is the
Okay,
difference.
so we should let
I can't
everybody
speak
know
on
this.
those issues.
So
I've been married
Camille's
for
been married for 10 years.
10 years, yeah.
But you've been with your wife since you were
about 20 years. Yeah, so I'm
15 years old.
15. We started dating when I was 16.
Lost your virginity to the wife.
Locked it up with her.
Wow. So that's the only vagina that you've felt
That's all
and experienced.
That's what we've got.
Wow. Crazy. So that's what you think vaginas feel like.
This is it.
They come in all shapes and sizes.
It could be terrible. It could be awful.
But maybe
but I'll never know, which is fine. I'm fine with it.
maybe that's what we're supposed to do.
I don't know. I know it works for me. You know, I don't
Because you
judge
don't
anyone
know
else
what
for
you're
it.
missing, right? You assume everything is like that or worse.
Sure. I mean, it could be better, but I also know that doing anything else might get me divorced quickly, and divorce is expensive.
Yes.
It's particularly expensive for me because I like my wife.
I like how.
So-
Oh, you mean expensive like emotionally?
Yeah, both.
Okay,
Yeah,
but if that's the
financially and
one
emotionally.
thing keeping you together in your
No,
relationship.
It's not the one thing, but it's important.
I don't want to get divorced because it costs a lot.
Look, when you go to Vegas, and you're a little hammered, and you know your judgment is impaired, and well, she's far away, maybe she'll never know.
Right.
I'm not that smart. Divorce is expensive. Those are the two guiding principles that will get you through most problems in your marriage.
Okay,
And then
I'm not that smart.
Candor and honesty and love and compassion and commitment, all that good stuff too. It's
So
all
there's
part of it.
never been a time where you're like watching porno or anything like that, and you're like, well, I don't do that. That'd be fun to try out. Maybe I don't want to do this with my wife. Maybe I want to do this with, just some girl in Vegas.
No, I always try to convince her to do those things.
So you convince her. Now, what if she's not against it? Do you go to Hoboken?
I'm sorry?
Hoboken.
What do you mean go to Hoboken?
Oh, you've never been to Hoboken, New Jersey?
Never been to Hoboken. What do you mean?
Oh, those girls are about it, bro. Are you kidding me? Hoboken, New Jersey is like 15 years in advance of like a sexual aptitude.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's unbelievul, the stuff that goes on in Hoboken.
I may not be credentialed sufficiently to go there. I'll stay. Must be this tall to ride.
You got to keep your faithful Mary Dick back here in Manhattan.
I'm fine with that. I am fine working within my limitations.
Got you.
I'm good with that. Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. Now that we got that out there, I don't even want to get into what you do. We've just been having so many conversations going on this far. I want to wait till Charlamagne gets here to talk about the Jay-Z video and that kind of stuff. But
Sure.
we're just talking about Kaepernick earlier, and your take on Kaepernick, and you have a kind of interesting view on that. What is if you could just refresh that?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the short version here is there are debates in which it is fair to just dislike both sides.
Yeah.
I think the people who are shouting at Colin Kaepernick and say, hey, you better stand up and you better salute that flag, are stupid. Like, you should not be coerced into being patriotic. And I can't tell you how to be patriotic. You get to do that yourself. That's fine. On the other side, however, Colin Kaepernick might be the worst possible spokesperson for any issue in the history of people.
Really?
He's not particularly bright or interesting.
You think that he's the worst football player?
I don't know.
There's got to
I
be
don't know
worse
anything about
football
that.
players.
No, I'm not saying that. But he is the guy who, during his sort of Black Lives Matter press conference, the very first one, like, where's the Fidel Castro T-shirt? Like, into the press conference. Like, you don't like the police, but you are wearing a T-shirt from a dictator who ran a place that could be called a police state, that executed people for disagreements, and that keeps people in prison today. There are political prisoners in Cuba.
Right.
And they are modernizing. It's just asinine. So he's not a good person. But there's sort of something else, related to all of that, and it's it's the sort of credibility of the issue.
Okay.
I think that there are issues with the cops. I think that there are issues that need to be addressed with respect to actual police reforms. I also think that there are significant issues with the Black Lives Matter movement and the emphasis that is placed on race with respect to a lot of these conversations. And it's like a recurring theme in a lot of like important things.
What do you mean?
So with the police, for example, I mean, look, we got to go back to like Mike Brown, Ferguson. There was a shooting that happened. It was tragic. I was on the air the day that the protests erupted.
Right.
And we were giving some thought to, well, how do we talk about this issue? And Charlamagne's walking in.
Welcome, Charlamagne.
Time is money, man. They had me waiting for 20 minutes downstairs, so I left.
Good for you.
I was supposed to be shooting a commercial, and the commercial was supposed to start at 10. It's 10:25 at the time we're recording this. So I got up and said, hey, guys, gotta leave. Oh, my bad. Yes. So what the hell are we talking about?
Okay, we're talking about Camille's take. Where do you want him, Greg? Fucking open your mouth.
Over here.
Jesus Christ. Okay.
That sounded so gay.
Listen.
Where do you want him, Greg? Open your mouth. Jesus Christ, Schultz. Say
Anyway.
pause.
Okay. So, Camille was talking to us about Black Lives Matter. And where were we?
Well, we just got started. I mean, we
Okay.
talked a little bit about Kaepernick. I said I dislike both sides.
Camille hates Black Lives Matter.
This is not true. I don't hate
Camille's anti-Black lives.
I've heard him say that before. I haven't heard him
Never
say
heard me
he's
say
anti-Black lives, but I've heard his take on why he doesn't agree.
Yes, no, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical of Black Lives Matter. I'm not skeptical of the need for police reform.
Nothing wrong being skeptical. I feel like we should be skeptical about everything.
This is
But
true.
listen.
I agree.
We should listen, but
Absolutely.
be skeptical of
So
everything.
what is your skepticism? Where does it come from?
So it comes from here. I was saying, the Mike Brown situation, when it first happened, what we said on our program, The Independents, which you were on a bunch, Charlamagne, thank you. We said that we don't know what happened. We should wait and figure it out. There ought to be an investigation. It should be transparent. We should eventually figure out what happened here. But for a whole other universe of people, like they knew right away. They didn't need any explanation. The witness accounts, which were conflicting, were all they needed. And that plus their sort of well-established bias that, look, cops shoot black folk. They just do that. And it's a problem. We all know this already. The cops are racist. They're racist against us. And that's why they kill so many of us. There's a book forthcoming from a Washington Post reporter whose name is escaping me at the moment called They Can't Kill Us All. And that is sort of the sentiment. I think it's hyperbolic. I don't think it's supported by the facts. And I think that is important. Like the facts are actually important. The police do kill too many people, period. Black people are overrepresented as a share of the population, but there is nothing in the statistics that suggests to me, obviously, that the racial disparity is anything more than, in general, en masse, is anything more than sort of an artifact of in the same way that like blacks are overrepresented in various other crime stats.
So,
and it's important to just note that.
Let's clarify that. So you think that black people aren't targeted by the police more than any other race?
They are not targeted because they are black.
But it's been proven that
there's more police. Well, no, it hasn't actually.
Yes, it has. Profiling has been proven.
Sure, the profiling is a thing. But this is, I think, for most of the crime stats where police are involved, like there are important reasons, there's important context in which that stuff happens. So black people live in higher crime areas. They are more likely to have encounters with the cops. And cops in high crime areas tend to do a lot of sort of petty shit in order to try to tamp down crime. So they stop people, they harass them, they go through their pockets. That is what they do. That is what crime prevention looks like for many police departments.
Yeah,
It's
but those petty crimes shouldn't be ending in murder.
No, it should never end. And I think that is, but that right there, we agree on. And that's the conversation I want to have.
That's the only conversation.
So how do we fix that, right? So with Eric Garner, do we still have Lucy laws in New York City? The answer is yes. Do we need Lucy laws in New York City?
No.
Do we need stupid, arbitrary laws that bring people into conflict with the cops and turn us, citizens, into the enemy.
But
No,
but
that's
doesn't it
stupid,
seem like
and
you're
that's
victim
important.
blaming right now, though?
No. That's not victim blaming at
Because
all.
if Eric-
I'm actually focusing on the policy. I'm saying the policy drives these bad outcomes.
But in what world? Don't you think it's kind of sick that a Lucy law leads to somebody killing someone?
Look,
I don't think it's the Lucy law. I think it's the individual that's actually committing the murder.
It's in the same world where drug prohibition, just like alcohol prohibition before it, leads to a disproportionate amount of crime in certain communities. It leads to devastation and poverty in places like Chicago and Baltimore. Laws have their sort of intended effect, and then they have their unintended actual effect.
Mm-hmm.
And the drug laws in this country are supposed to tamp down addiction and make us all safer and make schools safer for kids. What they have actually done is created a dangerous black market for drugs. And when I say dangerous, I mean violent and lucrative. And they've also made the drugs themselves more dangerous because drugs like heroin and coke are laced with all kinds of bad shit, which generally speaking is what actually kills you in many cases.
Right.
So what has made police officers so violent? What are the things that are causing police officers, like yesterday in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where this guy, the guy in the helicopter was like, oh, he looks like a big bad dude.
Yeah.
He looks like he's on something. What was he doing? He was sitting outside of his car. His car was stalled. He called 911 twice to get assistance for his car. He's got his hands up in the air. He gets tased. He gets shot. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't reaching for anything. Like,
it's certainly
what's causing police to be that violent?
It certainly looks bad, and I can't speak to the facts of that particular case yet because there hasn't been an investigation. You know, we've all seen the same reports. What I can say is that with a place like Baltimore, there was that report that came out a couple of weeks ago from the Justice Department. And it's funny, you know, most of the coverage of that report was all about the racial bias. But the bullets in the report, if you actually read it, the first ones are about a lack of transparency, a lack of proper training, a lack of accountability, and systematic Fourth and First Amendment violations.
That's all we've been saying from day one. These are constitutional rights being violated.
But that's what I'm saying, Charlamagne. Like, that is the problem. And the fact of the matter is that the Baltimore Police Department is not predominantly white.
I agree with everything you're saying, but systemic racism is the problem too. The problem with racism is you can never prove it.
I think the issue is that if we conflate these things, and you just said it, right? We can't prove it.
But you know,
we also
believing in God.
But we also can't solve it, right? I can't wave a wand. I can't pass a law that makes people unracist. I can, however, pass laws that make cops more accountable. I can pass laws that make them have, say, lapel cameras, for example, and make them have a policy for how we get the footage and access to those lapel cameras.
But
I can have community review. I can if I care about those issues.
And
but right now,
I say that is because the laws are already in place. It's the fact that people are getting violated. Like,
no, they weren't in place.
No, in some cases
that's wrong.
We don't have
before
those
the Mike
we have
Brown
constitutional
situation,
rights. We need due process. We're not getting due process.
Before the Mike Brown situation, there was no mandatory dashboard cam. There was no mandatory lapel cam. There was no mandatory body cam on the cops.
We have constitutional rights. We have due process. Our due process has been getting violated.
But you're skirting over what you just said. You said, can you do that through legislation? And they just did do that.
No, I said they're there. I said those laws are already in place.
They weren't there.
They weren't there.
No, those rights.
Constitutional rights.
Yeah, the constitutional rights are there. You're right. But constitutional rights are violated often. I mean, this is actually how it always works. Constitutional rights are violated by the government. They're supposed. These are our rights. This is the stuff the government can't do to us. That being said, the accountability, it can't just be the policy from the Constitution, from the constitutional level, right? We actually need some legislation on the ground, and we need to have both laws, a system of justice, right, where we place emphasis on the right things, not bullshit things like sort of stopping people and arresting them for weed, but focusing on actual violence and theft. And we also need to have policies in place that keep cops honest. The old dictum is power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah.
That is what happens with the police.
Yes.
If there's no accountability, they do what they want, whether they're black or they're white, and whether their victims are black people or white people. And we've seen white people get shot, beat to death by police on camera, and we've seen cops who don't get nearly the sort of scrutiny we would expect.
And this is my issue. I go back to what Martin Luther King Jr. said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Absolutely.
These are constitutional rights being violated.
Yeah.
Not just black people being violated. Constitutional rights. So when you see fellow Americans getting this injustice, everybody should speak up. Because guess what? It could be you.
And I think it would be the trouble with Black Lives Matter is the conflation of the issue of sort of the needed police reforms and the systematic violations of rights with speculation about the motivation of the police. I don't have any sort of mechanism by which I can say, oh, well, you know what? He's the racist. There he is right there. That's the racist guy. You've pointed him out. Thank you. I don't know how to make racial bias go away to the extent it's there, or systematic or otherwise. What I can say is there are actionable things that we can actually do. There are ways that we can talk about these issues that build coalitions that don't involve wearing socks that have the cops depicted as pigs. Like, that is a cartoon. That is a circus. That makes me feel good as the person who is doing this signaling. But it doesn't solve the problem. In fact, it might actually do harm to the problem because it balkanizes the issue. It creates these teams and factions where now it's Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter. And that is bullshit.
I agree with that because it's generalizing.
Yeah.
And, I don't believe in generalizations. I don't believe that all cops are bad. I don't believe that all cops are pigs. But it works both ways, too. I feel like police officers look at black people with generalizations.
Some do.
And I feel like you need some sort of black people training. We need some sort of cultural diversity training for any police officer. If you are a person who works in a certain community, you work in a certain town, you should have some type of interaction with the people in that town, in that community, while you're in training. Before you even become a police officer. Take their gun, let them go walk the beat, just to go walk the playground, kick it with people, get to know people. Hi, my name is Officer such and such. I'm going to be a police officer in your community soon. I think stuff like that will go a long way.
But that isn't fundamentally about race. That is about getting involved in the community and being out in it. And the people who are protecting and serving ought to be engaged with their community. And
I agree, but it is about race in the standpoint of, what if you're from South Dakota, right? Some town in South Dakota where you've never interacted with any black people whatsoever.
But that's not race.
But you become a police officer in freaking Atlanta.
But that's not race. That's culture.
Yeah, because you could be.
If you're a white guy who's never interacted with black people, you should have to interact with the community before you get in that community.
Charlamagne, if you're a white guy who grew up around all black people, and you came from South Dakota and then you moved to Atlanta, seeing black people is not going to be shocking.
Or your
No, it's not your point. Your point is just because
you said a white person who grew up around black people. I said a white person who grew up in an area like South Dakota, which is predominantly white, and you moved to an Atlanta. If you've never had interaction with black people
but that's cultural.
You got a false narrative of black people based off just things you've seen or things you've read. You should have to actually interact. You know why I don't think all white people are racist? Because I kick it with white people, and I've kicked it with white people my whole life.
But let me explain what you were saying. Why it's confusing? You're confusing race and culture, because somebody who is that white person from South Dakota, it doesn't matter if he's white or black. He could be a black dude in South Dakota that's only been raised around white people. If he goes to Atlanta, it's not like he's going to see black skin and go, "Oh, I get them."
Okay,
that's not how it works.
So it's race and culture.
Yeah,
I think it's more important culture than race.
Well, this is the thing.
It's because if you grow up in China, you're going to speak Chinese. You're going to know the customs. You're going to know all these things. You're going to understand Chinese people.
Yeah.
And then if you go from China to Brooklyn, or if you go to China to fucking some Irish neighborhood in the Bronx, all of a sudden there's going to be culture shock. You're not going to understand these people. You're going to treat them based on the way you've seen them in movies, etc.
I agree, it is culture, but majority of the time it's race.
Well,
it's both. Because
the question is, what is race? Like, what do we mean when we talk about race? Because race is not a biological thing, right? It is a social construct. It's not genetic. I can't look at your DNA and say that you are a black guy. It's about phenotypic
Yes,
traits.
you can.
No, actually, you can't.
I'm black.
Yeah, it doesn't work like that.
Yes, it does.
It is
like
not
I get it, but this goes back to the whole thing about gender as a social construct.
Yeah, well, gender and sex,
it's social construct.
But gender and sex
confusing.
Here's a better example, right? When I look at you, and then I look at an Eritrean black dude, I don't see the same black dudes. Like, I'm not like, that's just one black dude. The Eritrean, I'm like, that's different. There's something going on here that's different.
What if you didn't know he was Eritrean?
If you look, well, I just know that from the forehead.
But then you're disproving what he said.
No, my point is that race, you could make the argument that there's not this one overarching view of race, right? No. Because I'm looking at black people from different parts of Africa. They look completely different, have different characteristics, etc. So why would I label you guys as the exact same person? Furthermore, if you look at me, white dude, right? Mm-hmm. And then you look at some fucking Norwegian Viking looking guy, are we the same type of white dude?
You're Jewish.
I'm not.
Whatever that means. I mean, and for me, look, at a minimum, I think we have to acknowledge that when we inject race into certain conversations, we actually make it more complicated and not less. And we may not be clarifying the problem. And we certainly may not be making it easier to land on the solution.
Okay, to that point, I think it's not okay. There are certain conversations you need to have about race. It's not like you can't talk about race.
You can't ignore it.
But I think what you're trying to say is there are certain situations that we blame the outcome on race when in reality it might be something else, and we can't even get to that. We can't even get to the reality because we are so clouded by the racial judgment.
Yeah, you can't.
Yes.
You can't prove racism. Like that's the hard. Like you literally can't.
Well,
prove racism.
It's not even about proving racism. It's about maybe the issue isn't racism, but since we are so obsessed with it, we can't even get to the root cause. And if we can't get to the root cause, we can't fix the problem.
Listen, man. When I see somebody in a helicopter say that a guy looks like a bad dude, just for no reason, like he didn't have a gun, you know, he just had a white T-shirt on, 40 years old, father of 4, outside of his car. I gotta say it's something. What? And if it's not something, I need to know what made you think he was a bad dude.
But this is what I'm saying. We can only speculate about that.
We really can't, though. I think in light of history, we got enough evidence to know
still speculation.
It's blackness.
It can be informed speculation if you like, but it's still speculation. And I'm willing to speculate about plenty of things. But when it comes to like police violence, when it comes to the war on drugs, any number of important issues, I don't really have to. Like the actual facts, the data that is available tells, for me, a story that is fairly straightforward and gives me a sense of what ought to happen if we care about making things better.
That is true.
Like if the drug war is a problem for you, like it's not the fact that black people are over incarcerated is relative to their share of the population that makes me concerned about this.
It's the drug problem in general.
It's the drugs in general, and particularly it is the myth that drugs are uniquely dangerous and uniquely addictive, and therefore we have to do something about it. 1970, we talked about this a little bit before, but 1970s, 1980s, during the heroin epidemic, the first one, and the crack epidemic, black people, black legislators, black activists were demanding that cops come into their communities. They were demanding harsher sentencing guidelines in order to deal with the perceived problem. And the perceived problem was that drugs are destroying our community. As it turns out, the black market for drugs is almost certainly far worse than the consequences of drug use and abuse.
Explain the black market, though.
The black market for drugs is when you have an illegal substance, you have criminal gangs.
During Prohibition,
and fight
the mafia
made a lot of money.
And during Prohibition, it was the mafia, and today it's kids on the corner.
So essentially, by making something illegal, you create a black market for it.
Yeah.
Making drugs illegal, you create a black market for kids to sell these drugs in the neighborhood, and then crime comes with that.
And you can deal with the junkies. You know what I mean? Junkies, you send to rehab or whatever. But it's the
junkies aren't
dealers.
shooting each other. That's the
it's
issue.
the dealers, it's the gangs, it's the mafia, it's those people.
Which you can fight them head on. And look, we've poured $1 trillion, more than $1 trillion, into the drug war in this country. The drug war is 100 years old. Most people don't know that shit. 100 years old. Harrison Narcotics Act. Rates of addiction to drugs have remained pretty much steady since the 1970s. And we have poured more and more money into it. We are not making progress. If the interest is in curbing addiction, then making drugs illegal and locking people up for possession and stuff isn't really helping. The only thing, it actually helps certain people. It helps the public employee unions who make a ton of money lobbying for tougher penalties and keeping prisons full. And I don't mean private prisons. That is a canard. That is another distraction. There's almost no one locked in private prisons. They are a small percentage of the total prison population is in private prisons.
Really?
Yeah, it's public prisons.
So the private prison thing is a myth.
The private prison thing is a distraction. It is a distraction. It was something around 9% the last time I looked at it. And we did just see that the federal guidelines are saying that they're going to close private prisons. The federal feds will no longer be used.
There's a perfect example of you don't need an explanation for something you want to believe.
That's true. Yeah.
You know, like with religion, when someone's like, "Oh yeah, heaven's great, it's awesome," and you go, "Okay." You don't go, "Well, how do you know?"
But it's not that the private, like you said, the private prisons do exist, but it's a distraction. But I like the article you wrote the other day about you was talking about the reason for mass incarceration isn't necessarily drugs; it's violent crime.
Well, it's violent crime. Yeah,
I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, which look, and there's
explain that.
It's somewhat complexity. Yeah, so I mean, we saw the Jay-Z thing last week in the New York Times. This video, which look, I love Hope. I love Jay.
Explain the video for people who haven't seen it. Right?
Well, it is essentially an animated piece. It's maybe 4 or 5 minutes long.
There's an artist that's painting.
Yeah, an artist
scenarios.
is painting scenes, and Jay gives his take on the drug war. The title is "The Drug War is an Epic Fail," and the themes are: we haven't invested in these communities. there are a lot of racial disparities in the way that we enforce the drug war, and it's having a huge impact on certain communities. We should end the drug war. It is a bad idea. We should rethink it. I agree with a lot of that. Where I get concerned is the conflation of issues with respect to race and stuff. And he also talks about mass incarceration. And when he talks about it, he only talks about the racial disparity, and he talks about it in the context of drugs.
And what does he say on that? Well, specifically,
his
specific point.
I don't have the quote.
African Americans get locked up at a higher rate than white people do for basically the same basically the same drug crimes.
Yeah. And there's two categories of issue here. The first is that yes, that is a true fact. They get locked up more for the same kinds of drug crimes. They also live in places where drug enforcement is different. We know that drug enforcement is different. We are near the financial district in Tribeca, Soho. You can order coke like on Craigslist. Like it will come to your house
right
on
there,
a bike,
chilling, Wall Street,
and there's not a huge issue there. If you live on the south side of Chicago and you want to get some crack, like that is a more dangerous proposition, and the drug laws are enforced in a different way there. Yes, more black people live there than in Tribeca, so there are disparities. They largely boil down to that sort of thing. The second thing, though, is that when we actually look at the explosion in incarceration rates, it's not that most people who are going to jail are there for drug possession. They are actually there for violent crime, like shooting people.
And furthermore,
in which case, you got to put them in jail because they shot someone. Is some of that violence related to the drug war? Probably.
Sure.
But who knows how much? It's hard to say.
But also about the drug crimes, and this is only something I saw from the show that you were on the clip that you sent me yesterday. But there was a guy talking about the majority of people who are locked up are there for trafficking, and so the vast minority of people are in there are jail for just for possession, and the people who are in jail just for possession a lot of times pled down. Sure. So we're not talking about someone who's just walking around with a joint, then gets clipped, and then gets sent to jail for 20 years. That is not the reality. The reality is there are drug trafficking people, and you maybe don't have enough to get them on that charge, so you go, okay, we're going to give you minor in possession.
But it's important to think of like the complex chain of events too. Like for the kid who gets stopped for weed and gets a record and gets in trouble and can't get a job, like your options start to narrow and get more and more limited. So yeah, you're not just the drug possession, you're the drug possession plus the violent crime, and you did that because there is a pathway. And it is the pathway that is created by having this illegal black market for the substance. Like violent crime dissipated dramatically in Chicago after they legalized alcohol, and we don't have to speculate about this.
You're talking about prohibition.
Yeah. We don't have to speculate about this completely. There are places where they have decriminalized drugs, and for 15 odd years they've seen the consequences of the decriminalization, and the consequences are that for most drugs in most demographic cohorts, use has gone down, which is kind of amazing. It's kind of incredible.
Because nobody wants it when it's legal.
Well, maybe that, but also some of the hard stuff. I mean, you might not want
like
the hard
a true
stuff
pedophile.
if you want some weed.
Kylie's not hot no more because she's 18. Kylie was hotter when she was 17 years old.
No comment.
All right, let's take a break for a second, pay some bills, because this week's episode of Brilliant Idiots is brought to you by Away Travel. Okay? Away Travel suitcase made with premium German polycarbonate. That's by far the best polycarbonate, by the way. Make that material in a lot of places in the world, but nobody makes it like the Germans. They're unrivaled in strength and impact resistance and feature a lightweight and sleek design. I'm looking at the bag right here. First of all, this is what I use because I travel a lot. I got these shows, Hesitation Tour. Come on out and check it out. And but it's dope. I mean, the bag is dope. It's light, which is very important. We got the moving wheels at the bottom. We don't do these like lug around your bags anymore. I don't believe in it. If I see somebody at the airport with a lug around your bag situation, I assume that you came from a country that is very poor. Let me see this here. Oh, this is nice. We got a charger in here, which is wild because, you know, sometimes you get on these flights and they put you on an old plane thinking they could charge the same as a new plane, and they don't give you any charger, so you're out halfway through. What the hell is it? They have something for your wet or dirty clothes? That is brilliant. Yeah, the washable laundry bag. That is absolutely brilliant because when I travel, I got all my dirty stuff and it goes in the same bag and my entire thing smells like socks. So This is absolutely not good at all. They have a TSA approved lock on this, okay? You can't just lock your stuff anymore, not in this climate, unless you have the TSA approved one. This is brilliant. I'm into it, okay? I'm absolutely into this away bag. This is my thing. This is what I'm going to be using, okay? Best of all, the best thing, my favorite thing about this entire bag is, by far, as I get this script up to read, the lifetime warranty. Away has got your back if anything goes wrong with your suitcase. If anything breaks, they'll fix it or replace it for you, okay? For life. Away Travel is so confident in their product, they're willing to give you a 100-day trial with the suitcase. Live with it. Travel with it. Instagram it. And if at any point in time you decide that you don't want, you just return it. No, I don't understand the risk. Just get the fucking bag, okay? Get your new suitcase from Away Travel today and get free shipping on any order within the continental U.S. For $20 off your order, visit awaytravel.com/idiots and use the promo code idiots during checkout. That's awaytravel.com/idiots, promo code idiots during checkout. Away, first class travel at a coach price.
I do agree with a lot of what you're saying because you can't prove race. But what else? What other variable is it?
I mean, I think there are a lot of variables, and it depends on.
I want to talk. Let's talk about the Tulsa, Oklahoma situation specifically.
I mean, it's hard. It's really, really hard. Like, we don't know the facts. So
it's really not in light of history. But I understand you because you're a factual, logical person. If it's not on paper, if you can't go to this and say this is what it is, then you don't discuss it, which I respect.
Well, in some respects, like I said, the Mike Brown situation when it first
you got to stop talking about Mike Brown. But I'm gonna tell you why I don't like talking about Mike Brown because Mike Brown is probably the only one to me that is sketchy. Like it's no doubt in my mind, Mike Brown probably actually did get into an altercation with Darren Wilson. Probably, and that's why people like to go to Mike Brown.
Well, the reason
but talk about Walter Scott running away,
Philando Castile.
Talk about Philando Castile.
Yeah. Look, those are bad shootings.
Talk about Eric Garner.
They're bad shootings, but they're also, and this is important, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way. I care about these issues deeply, and I want there to be fewer incidents. Those are also anecdotes. Right? Like, we know those people's names because there is a well-worn narrative in the media, and they look for these stories now. Like, they look for the white cop and the black victim. Yeah. In fact, that Milwaukee situation immediately got less interesting.
The second was
once we found out it was a black cop.
What was the Milwaukee situation?
With Milwaukee, this was, 4 weeks ago?
Yeah, Milwaukee
there were some
cop.
riots in Milwaukee. A Milwaguey cop shot a black man.
The guy in the car.
Initially saying he was unarmed. Then the cop said, well, he had a stolen gun.
Well,
then
put the timeline together, the story
because
I remember that, but let's talk about that. It's not the story didn't dissipate because it was a black cop. Story dissipated when they realized, okay, this guy was a stolen gun and he was a criminal. He had a record. There's certain things everybody got common sense and they be like, okay, I get it.
Kinda. I mean, look, long after you just met, I know you don't want to talk about Mike Brown, but we know now that there's a pretty good possibility that there was an altercation, that there was this confrontation that took place in the store, that he didn't have his hands up. That didn't stop Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I would love to talk to at some point, from writing his book and making Mike Brown like the patron saint of this issue. And this for me is
I still don't feel like Mike Brown should be dead though. I feel like if Darren Wilson was a police officer who grew up in that community or had a relationship with that community, that situation would have been handled different. Mike would have had a different respect for Darren. Yeah, so I still don't think he should be dead. Yeah, based off.
I don't think he's saying that he should be dead. I think he's saying that there's situational.
I'm saying it's complicated. And look, there's so much here.
So are you saying that some of these killings are just outliers, but they feed the narrative? So you're saying at a certain
they can either be outliers, they could even be pretty common. It's easy to make it seem as though only black people are getting shot when those are the stories that get talked about the most. If I am white and I am beaten by the cops to death in the street on video while I'm screaming for my father, which is what happened to Kelly Thomas, you might not hear that story because I happen to be white.
The same week Philando Castile and Alton Sterling got killed, it was the white guy in California. I think he was white. If he wasn't, he was something. He wasn't black. Yeah. And he got shot. Hands up. They shot him. He came out the truck, put his hands in there. They shot him and killed him.
And this is the thing.
But this is my point. Why doesn't America get pissed off?
That story.
Why isn't America pissed off? Like, I want America to be pissed off.
What?
About police killing unarmed Americans.
And I'm concerned about it, but
I'm
deeply concerned about it.
It comes down to fear, right? We're not afraid of police killing white people. It's not a fear that we have.
Well, you need to be.
It should be.
Listen,
you should be.
I'm not saying whether we should or we shouldn't. it's just not something we happen to be afraid about. Like, I don't feel as a white guy walking down the street that if a police guy pulls me over, that I'm going to be killed. Matter of fact, if we're together in the car, I'm concerned for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm literally concerned. Like, I remember watching the Terrence Crutcher thing yesterday and going, you know what? If I'm a black dude, the second I get pulled over, I'm saying, I would prefer if you put handcuffs on me now, just so you know that nothing will happen.
You still might get shot.
My wife,
No.
My
But
wife.
regardless if you put them, regardless if you put them or not, my feeling is I'm very nervous. Just put the handcuffs on me now, just so you feel comfortable and I can feel comfortable, and we'll be okay.
Well,
No, Oscar Grant got shot with handcuffs, laid on his stomach in the back.
Then tase me. Immediately tase me.
The cop who shot Oscar Grant said, "Oh, I thought it was my taser."
Yeah.
The guy yesterday, Terrence, got tased first,
But
and then got shot.
But we are doing the anecdote thing, and so let me inject this into it. You know, last
All
year,
it takes is an antidote.
anecdotes.
Antidote. That's all it takes is one.
It's true.
Honestly, I don't even know.
That's all we.
The
that's
reason
all we
we're
need
all
to
here
prove it to
now is
ourselves.
because of the power of one.
No,
But
because
let
we
me-
don't
but
need
let
to
me
prove
give you-
it.
but let me give
real
you-
quick.
but let me
We don't
give
need
you-
to prove it. When we don't
Sure.
need proof for shit we agree with.
Well, that much is true. But let me give you the other part of this, which is that last year there are 98 odd people who were killed by police and unarmed. This is according to the numbers we have from the Washington Post.
Only 98?
98.
So this year it's like 100 and
I don't
Plus.
know. I don't know what the total number.
They were killed by
I'm not
police
sure if it's
unarmed. That's a
Yeah.
different
Unarmed.
statistic
I'm
than
not sure
somebody
if
who had a
that's-
gun.
I'm not sure if that's right for this year. But in either case,
Sure.
we know 98 last year.
Gotcha.
let's Google.
Yeah, we can Google. Washington
We'll take your
Post
word
generally
for it
has the
right
best
now.
Numbers. What percentage of that do black people make up? Are they
Which
40%? No. There's something like 20 odd percent of that total number.
Mhm.
Which, look, black folks are 13% of the population. That is high relative to their share of the population. But they are also much more likely to live, as I've stated earlier, in these high crime areas. They are underrepresented as sort of their proportion of the share of violent
So
crime.
not enough black people are getting
Well,
killed.
no,
last
what
year-
I'm
last
saying
year-
is-
last year-
what
last
saying
year-
is from
I'm
a
looking
percentage
at-
standpoint.
You're right. It said police killed more than 100 unarmed black people in 2015. 37% of unarmed people killed by police were black in 2015.
Right. Okay, so
37%.
Okay, so I got my number wrong. But in either case, like there is an overrepresentation in those numbers, like across the board. It isn't so high relative to that overrepresentation in various other categories of crime. Which is just, it's important to note that. And it's important to note how small this number is that we're talking about. In a place like Chicago, where you could have 100 people get shot, and this has happened this year, which is crazy. 100 people get shot in a week, like a 7-day period. Like those numbers sound like they came out of Syria.
Mhm.
We're not talking about that, and this isn't a.
They are.
But this isn't a. But this. Let me just say, because I don't want anyone to get confused. Like this is not a. We shouldn't be talking. If Black Lives Matter, we should be talking about black on black crime. This is not that. This is just me saying that while I think people should be concerned about police violence directed at citizens, it should be proportionate. And we ought to be able to say, well, yeah, that's an issue, and this is an issue, and so is this.
So-
and this issue might be a little bigger. And
Let me
It's hard for us
clarify.
it's hard for us not to blur issues.
No, but let me clarify what he's trying to
can-
say. What he's trying to say is you think the proportionate amount of interest and effort should go out to the amount of people that are being killed.
It should be
so
commensurate.
if in your mind, let's say 37% of 100 black people a year, so 37 unarmed black people are killed by the police, right? And
which is, look, and the whole total number is bad.
Sure.
Yeah.
But comparatively to this one part of Chicago where you have hundreds of people being shot, you think that the amount of attention that is brought to that Chicago issue should exceed that of which is brought to the 37.
I think that as responsible citizens, as people who care about each other,
Right.
that our interest in these issues, that we ought to be able to say, well, yeah, that matters. So does this. And we shouldn't be hyperbolic.
But you're not
When
looking at the
people say-
variables of the issues, though.
Well, I
Because
think
you're talking about
I think
Chicago, you're talking about 100 citizens shooting
Shot.
each other.
Yeah, yeah.
And you're talking about the 37% of African Americans who were shot by police. You're talking about police, people that we pay to protect and to serve. We don't expect that from them. I hate to say it,
I'm
but
with
we
you.
expect it
Yeah, yeah.
from civilians,
I'm not
people who don't know
dismissing-
better. The
No,
people
no, I'm
who
not
should know
dismissing.
better, we don't expect that from.
Yeah,
At
I'm
the
not
end of the day,
dismissing
it's
that
dead
issue. I think
people.
it-
That's something that always concerns me. It's right.
Yeah.
It's like at the end of the day, don't we care about saving lives, like regardless of who the person taking them
Yeah,
is?
but the reason it's a bigger issue is because the same reason it's a bigger issue if a celebrity fucks a 13-year-old as opposed to some fucking scumbag in the hood.
That's
you know
fair.
what I'm
That's fair.
saying?
And it is different when they are in fact tasked with protecting and serving us and making society better and safer, and we should be able to trust them. I want people working on those issues,
but
I don't want people to confuse those issues.
I wonder if it's that different. Like if you asked me, right, if we compared, if you compared how many people were killed by the police, regardless of color of their skin, but just how many people were killed by the police, and then how many people were killed by each other, white, Chinese, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
And the statistics showed that we had thousands of people that were killing each other, right? And less than 100 people that were killed by police. To me, I look at and I go, listen, this is tragic what's happening. We need to address that. But I'll take saving thousands of lives over saving tens of lives.
You can't have the people that are here to protect and serve us acting like those other thousands of just regular civilians who are killing each other.
I mean, it's easy to say that.
Somebody has to have order. Somebody has to have like just common sense. Like,
how many more moms are upset? Right? How many more people lose a dad? How many more? Like, it comes down to, yes, I understand that there's something gravely wrong and more wrong. If we're judging on a scale of wrong, there's something more wrong about someone who is there to serve and protect murdering somebody. Absolutely. I agree that, right? And we look at it even the opposite way. When you kill somebody that's there to serve and protect, that's looked at as more wrong. Like, you get life for killing. So clearly there's a scale.
I can't look at the person that's here to serve and protect as just a regular person when they're trying to kill me.
Exactly. Yeah. And vice versa, right? So if their life is more valued, if a policeman's life is more valued in terms of killing them, then their their accountability should be higher in terms of when they kill you. I'm with that on the same. But at the same point in time, we still have to worry about lives here. Like, there's a huge it's to be honest, in a lot of ways you could even liken it to disease, right? If there's a disease that affects 40 people out of the year and there's a disease that kills thousands of people, are we going to put 10 times more attention on the 40 person disease?
Yes, that's what we do. Ebola, Zika.
But don't we criticize ourselves for that?
HIV/AIDS is out here fucking killing people at by the millions.
But don't we criticize ourselves? Don't we go, oh, this is silly, this is...
No, we don't.
Are we taking care of
you
Zika
wear a mask at the airport but won't wear a condom.
But we should, but I think, but we should be rational.
We act like Zika is the shit that's going to ruin us all.
But right now we're criticizing that behavior, right? We're like, man, we got all this money and all this time and all this media attention on Zika when we got people dying of leukemia still. Fucking A, dude. Let's...
Remember that podcast I sent you? It was a TED Talk. And it was like, if you hear about it in the news, don't be concerned about it. Seriously.
Because it may or may not be true.
No, but
as a rule,
the argument was,
I get the argument.
In order for it to make the news, I think we spoke about it, in order for it to make the news, sensational. It has to be sensational. Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's important. And my career in media is a little weird. If there is a sort of central core to it, it is hopefully advocating for skepticism, not like a crude sort of dismissal of everything and embracing of every conspiracy theory, but thoughtful skepticism, thoughtful opposition to governmental authority and power, pushing back on all of them, not trusting them and taking them at their word. You can get a guy like Barack Obama who is nice, who is cordial, who tells you all of the things that you want to hear when he runs for office, but then when he gets there, the outcomes look a hell of a lot like what you might have expected from the Bush administration.
Every president.
And I think that's
every politician.
But this is the issue. I think that skepticism is necessary for us to get to a place where we can actually improve things. And I do think we can improve things. We've seen improvements in any number of areas on any number of important issues. Getting real, tangible results and concrete improvements requires us to be bright and thoughtful and skeptical and prudent.
I'm all for being skeptical.
Crazy.
You should read the Fifth Agreement. That's what the Fifth Agreement is all about. Being skeptical, but listening.
All right, let's take a break for a second. Pay these bills. This week's episode of Brilliant Idiots is also brought to you by Avión Tequila. When you hear the word inefficiency, you tend to think of something negative, don't you? I mean, Camille was talking about the government being inefficient, or maybe he wasn't. I don't know if we've gotten to that point in the podcast yet. But I'm recording these ads afterwards, and then we're sliding them in. So let's pretend that he did, or if he didn't, we're going to keep it moving. But the reality of the matter is, inefficiency doesn't always mean that it doesn't work, okay? Because inefficiency is crucial when you're elevating your craft to an art. Avión Tequila, voted the world's best tasting tequila, is surely one of the most inefficient tequilas you can find. Avión wasn't created by celebrities or hedge fund investor billionaires. It's a collaboration between a tequila-loving entrepreneur and a family who, for generations, were inefficient, okay? They were growing agave in their small town, Jesus Maria, in the highlands of Jalisco, Mexico. Avión Tequila is made by real people with a true passion for their craft. They pride themselves on the art of creating beautifully inefficient tequila. So sip on Avión neat on the rocks or use it for your top shelf margarita. Share Avión with those that appreciate what they eat and drink, and we promise it will become theirs and your favorite ultra premium tequila. And please drink Avión responsibly. Con responsabilidad. All right, back to the show. You brought up an interesting point when we were talking before about like the fastest growing group of people in prison is
the fastest growing
homosexuals.
Demographic in prison.
I don't know about that.
They don't go to jail.
Like white.
If I was gay, I'd be trying.
Like white male.
I'd be trying to get just a bunch of dudes working out all day.
No,
Fuck
because they're
that.
getting turned out.
That's David Barton's gym.
You go in there straight, and then you become a part of the fastest growing group in prison.
And I want to. Oh my god. Which is also a problem.
How convenient is that you find out you're gay in jail?
No, you don't find out you're gay. You learn to like it.
Learn to like dick? Bro, fuck out of here, man. You either like dick, you don't like dick. But what a pleasant surprise. Like the first time you getting raped, you're like, ooh, okay. What's this right here?
I got 100 years of life. What else is there to do?
Imagine you raping somebody and he just goes, deeper.
No, imagine you getting raped and the guy behind you says, "Be skeptical." don't just disregard this dick, all right? Don't just chalk this up to you getting raped, okay?
Stop acting like you don't into this shit, bro. Come on.
But yeah, I don't want to overstate the point because it's likely that there are other sort of ways that we could cut this up. But white males are a very fast growing demographic,
and you chalked it up to.
Well, it is related to the heroin epidemic and meth and other drugs that are prominent in certain communities and not others.
In rural
and which get
rural communities.
Yeah. And which get treated as just like, they need rehabilitation.
No, but people are going to jail.
Yeah.
Like they are going to jail at pretty high rates. No, I don't think they should. I think that we ought to do something about the drug war, and by do something, I am broadly in favor of decriminalization, and I'll go a step further than that, legalization, because most people who use drugs don't have an issue. They don't have a problem.
Yeah, they should be in rehab, not jail.
Even most people who use drugs don't need rehab. I mean, if we look at the numbers, like it's less than 20% for most of the really hard drugs of the people who use a drug like heroin or coke. Seriously.
Those are hard drugs,
who are actually addicted.
Furthermore,
and it's important
the
to
people that go
20%.
to rehab, 90, I think something like 90% or 95% relapse.
So what do they need then? Because they're not going to get off heroin on their own, bro.
Well, it's hard. Well, for the 20%,
some people just going to be on heroin.
But I think it's important to note that like most of the people who use heroin won't become addicts, and most of the people who use heroin are not addicts.
I do not support what Kamel is saying right now.
Well, no, you don't have to support it, but this is.
If you do heroin, you're probably going to become an addict.
No, it's just not true. And
I don't know.
I hear you. I know. And I get the.
So if you take heroin one time, you're not going to want it again?
2 times. You may want it again, but
first of all, if you do heroin and you become an addict, that's on you. You know what the fuck it does. I have no sympathy for someone who does heroin. Because look, here's the thing. Never have you has someone done heroin, right? And then their life got better.
Yeah, that's not a one-time thing.
No,
that's not a one-off.
You do heroin.
Not like taking Molly.
Heroin?
Heroin. It's heroin, sucking dick. That's exactly the trajectory of heroin, and everybody knows it. Let's stop back. I don't want you to do this nonsense.
Empirically accurate.
Empirically accurate. Name one rock star that hasn't sucked dick that did heroin. I guarantee all of them were sucking dick. Guaranteed.
I can't speak to that authoritatively.
Listen, I can. Okay, I listened to a lot of music when I was younger, and there's a direct correlation between rockers that have sucked dick and the music that they make.
I just want to know what Kamel
Richard Pryor sucked dick. Maybe sucking dick is the way to be great.
Richard Pryor sucked the crack. I mean, he smoked crack. But are you saying it's okay to be a functional drug addict? Like, I'm trying to figure it out.
We're all functional drug addicts. You're a functional drug addict.
Well, this is true. I use Adderall, and meth. Is Adderall. Like they're the same drug. Mm-hmm. I am on Adderall right now. It helps me be better at most things in life. And it's worth noting that we give it to kids. They are the same drug. I don't think fear-mongering with respect to illicit drugs is actually going to get us sound policy. I think more often than not, it's gotten us really bad policy, and it's got us in the state that we are in with respect to the drug war.
You've never lived around crackheads, have you?
No, I mean, sure. I live in New York, and I have
I'm talking
family,
about
I have family
had
in Harlem,
crackheads
so
break
I've
in your
seen it.
house.
No, I haven't had
like
that. Nope.
it's not a pretty sight.
And look,
Okay, but can we also make the argument that, like, yes, crackheads will break into your house, but they're also very useful crackheads.
Oh yeah, listen.
Nobody wants to talk about the positive
right.
effects of crackheads
Right.
because crackheads, they'll wash your car. That was the
your
first
goddamn
car.
grass better than a Mexican.
Crackheads were the first Mexican. Can we acknowledge that crackheads were the first Mexicans?
And by the
they were
way,
the first free labor force or cheap labor force in America.
And by the way,
not the first.
And by the way, two of the best blowjobs in my life came from crackheads, bro. So I mean, they do serve a purpose, but it's not like an irrational fear.
Hold on, wait, what?
No, I'm saying an irrational fear.
I just see crackhead as a dude for whatever reason.
No.
Yeah, I think it's important to here again conflation. Like, I think it's important to separate the conversation about drug use and drug addiction, like, from one another. Most people who use won't become addicts. These are not like numbers I'm making up. It's like they're CDC numbers. If someone wants to go check out the NIH, like, you can find the statistics for the drug that you're interested in, and they're not shy about telling you this. And we ought to recognize that. And if most people who use don't have a problem, if we talked about alcohol the way that we talk about heroin, we would only focus on the fact that there are homeless people who are drinking at 6 a.m. And who are drunk all of the time and who live in the street.
But they do,
and we would ignore the fact that most of us have a drink.
And are functioning parts of society.
But they combat alcohol way more than they do the hard drugs. I mean, since we've been kids, there's always been don't drink and drive commercials and highways and byways.
We are more scared of illegal narcotics than we are of alcohol. I just don't think fear works. I think when we lie to kids and we tell them, look, if you use crack, heroin, cocaine, it will ruin your life.
And then
they use it, and then they use it and find out that, hey, I can actually do this and not die.
No.
But wait, hold on. Let's go back to this. I think the point isn't whether they use it and it ruins their life. I think the point is they're going to use it regardless if it's legal or illegal.
Well, there's
no barrier of entry. Just because you make a drug illegal, it doesn't stop kids from smoking crack. It doesn't stop kids from snorting coke, etc. So if they're going to do it anyway, and you have the potential to remove a criminal element for it that is sending kids to jail and literally killing thousands of people a year because of violent, drug dealing, altercations, this kind of stuff. Why not just remove the criminal element? They're going to do it anyway. I guess you could make the argument that more people in Colorado are smoking weed now.
I think,
I don't know that that's a terrible thing.
It's not terrible because of the drug, but the argument or the fear would then be, oh shit, if we do the same thing with heroin, will more people be trying heroin?
And it's also, look, it's the first 24 months now. I don't know what will happen when we're just a lot more chill about it. Like, we make a big deal about the legalization and there because it's unique. If it were legal all across the 50 states, I just don't think it would be as huge a deal.
I just don't think nobody needs to do drugs. That was like the greatest thing ever. That's the greatest slogan. Just say no. I just don't do heroin. Just don't do. Why would you want to smoke crack?
Have you done heroin though?
No.
See, that's
the thing. Why? Because I've seen a heroin addict. I see what happens to heroin addicts. I see how they turn out.
Good it is.
Nah, I'm cool on that.
Look, I'm fine with not shoving needles in my body because I just don't like needles in my body.
Yeah.
I'm fine with avoiding any number of hard drugs. I think we have to just accept, at least we can say that just say no should be people's personal policy. The question is whether or not, man. The question though is whether or not we should have the government like enforcing a system of laws that are supposed to keep people from gaining access to these drugs and using them if we know that the net effect might be more violence,
but don't you think
and more dangerous drugs?
Don't you think the laws are so harsh because they simply just don't want people to do drugs?
I mean, sure, we all don't want that, and that's what I'm saying is the problem. The belief, and this is why I say, racism. Is it racism? Is it something else? The belief that crack was much worse than cocaine and required doubly hard sentencing is what gave us some of the disparities in rates of incarceration and prosecution, the length of sentences, and all that other stuff. That belief. And what I'm saying is that belief is not true. We know now that crack and cocaine are the same.
But
it is the mode of actual consumption that is different.
And it's almost crack and cocaine are the same.
They are the same. It's the same.
Yeah,
substance.
I mean, crack is just fried coke.
Yeah, but clearly people are willing to do more for crack than they are for coke.
It's not so clear. And a lot of that is
inaccurate.
And a lot of that is like
it's more addictive. Crack
and a lot
is more
of that
addictive.
is regional. No, it's not. It's the same drug.
It is.
That is why we're
and
having
it's
this.
more accessible.
No, it's not.
It is.
Well, it may be more accessible, but it's not.
It's more accessible
potent.
because of
It's not
price.
more- yeah, it's
I
not
think
more potent.
I think cocaine prices you out of addiction in a lot of ways. You can't literally afford to do crack. You can't afford to do coke all day. You can afford to do crack all day. A lot of times, crack addiction started with coke.
Crack is cheap. I'd give people $6 for $100.
There it is. And dude, you can get a little $5 rock.
In either case, the reason we're having the conversation about sentencing disparities is
Make
because
drugs legal.
they're different.
Just make them expensive. So
I
if
don't know how
you
you do
want to,
you would just create a new black market. If you make it
fuck, you're
illegal,
right.
if you make it illegal and then make it expensive, there'd just be a new black market.
You just cut 100 yards. You'd cut 100. If you listen,
You
if
cut
you don't
grass.
have no money,
he
you're gonna
equates
cut
crack
grass.
by.
You're gonna motherfucking wash a car. You're gonna suck a dick.
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna do what you got to do to get your motherfucking hit. I just don't think nobody should do drugs. Like I just don't think that's a
I'm fine
good
with that.
message to put out there.
I am fine with that perspective, and there
I
are plenty
respect
of
you though.
things
You're an
that
Adderall addict.
but I'm not an addict. I use it. I use it. Look, there is a definition of addiction, and the question is whether or not it's fundamental.
What is the definition of addiction? Because I know what it is for me.
Well, for you, I don't know what it is.
Do you suck dick
in the
for
diagnostic?
the drug? It's one thing. If you're not willing to suck dick for your
But
drug,
you could actually just sucking dick could be your passion. And if it's your passion, well, then
and you're
you like
lucky.
drugs.
What a
then
lucky
it's-
guy
right.
you are
So that's
that
not
you
the-
want to
that
suck
can't be the
dick for your
definition.
drug. Here's the thing. Would
definition
you suck
of-
dick for Adderall? That's the question.
No, is the answer.
If you had a really
I would
important
not.
interview, you had to interview Ta-Nehisi Coates, and you had no Adderall around, and there's one guy, he goes, listen, I got some Adderall,
No,
but it's
I'd
at
do
the
it-
bottom
I'd do
of
it
my
cold.
dick.
I would do it cold if that was the only option.
So you're not addicted. You
Yeah.
So are you on
not
Adderall
addicted.
right now?
I am, yeah. I took
What does it do for you?
30 milligrams this morning. Focus. And the real, so here's like an interesting thing. Like with meth, you know, we used to hear about meth mouth. Like your teeth will fall out, it'll ruin your face. That's not a thing. What actually happens is if you take these drugs in large amounts, you will stay up for a very long time. And if you stay up without sleeping for 2-3 days, like that will start.
Oh yeah,
to have
not sleep
ill
deteriorates your
health
body.
effects. Yeah, that is the issue. Adderall can definitely keep you up if you are taking it in too large a quantity.
Does it make
for
you
too
fuck
long a
better?
period of time.
Does it keep your dick
No,
in
it
your
gets you
It can
soft.
make sex better.
I thought it gets you
soft.
soft Adderall.
Well, maybe the dosage, but it can make you feel things in a better and more fuller way.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you ever get diagnosed with something
That's
like
never
ADD? Or?
Yeah, I have. I mean, do I have ADD? The doctor says I do. All I know, and what I've been told by various medical professionals who I've talked to about it, is anyone who uses that drug is likely to be able to focus better on things. Is there a risk of addiction? One could become addicted to any number of things. You can get addicted to food. There are fat people all over America who are addicted to food. Because the definition of addiction is whether or not it is disrupting your ability to live your life and maintain social connections. And
I don't
Adderall
believe in
doesn't do
food.
that.
I don't believe in food addiction.
Adderall actually helps me and makes me better. Well, I mean, there are people who can have a relationship with food that disrupts their lives and makes it hard for them.
No one's sucking dick for lasagna.
They yes,
some
but
good
that is
fucking
be-
lasagna.
But that is why
I want to
said
try that lasagna.
I don't believe your
I want that more than
I don't
anything.
believe your definition of addiction is a useful one in the sciences. It is great for the podcast, though.
So what
It
does
works.
addiction mean? You just like it?
No, I'm saying that it is a relationship with a activity or substance that is disrupting your ability to live your life and maintain relationships.
So it disrupts your ability to. Okay,
what
so you
you're
can be addicted to video games.
Yes, and people are.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, people are addicted to shopping. That people are addicted to spending money on video games, like on their phones. Kimoji.
Yeah.
To the point where they will like lose their home. They
Yeah,
lose
gambling can
families.
be an addiction.
Totally. Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
And the root causes of addiction, we don't really know. But there are any number of people who look at this area and say, well, there is a very high correlation, like really high, as in like rates of heart disease and obesity high, that people who have childhood trauma are more likely to suffer from addiction.
Well, with that said,
that's
it's impossible
everything.
to be on crack or heroin and like have a functioning life because somebody in your life is going to be upset. If you have a family, your wife's going to be upset that you're in there with fucking
it's
needles.
I'm just
your
saying
kids
that-
are going to be upset. Like you're going to disregard something.
That could be the case.
Yeah,
but I'm saying
work could also function the same way. Like you could be addicted to work, and you could be working all the time,
Totally.
and it can affect your social relationships. It can affect your family. So I don't like that definition because I feel
but
like it's too broad.
That's a thing. I would recommend that anyone who is interested in the topic, like read Gabor Mate's book, The Realm of Hungry Ghost. I would also strongly encourage, and I don't know if you met him before, Charlemagne, Carl Hart, who is a professor at Columbia University.
I don't think I met him.
A brilliant dude. he has written a book called High Price that I highly recommend folks read. And I got to go to TED with him a couple of years ago, and he gave a speech there.
Yeah.
About drugs and drug addiction. And, Carl gives his 15-minute talk, which parallels his book. You should read it if you're interested, or go watch the talk as well.
Yeah.
And at the end of his talk, he says, look, I am advocating for the decriminalization of all drugs. I think he'd probably go quite a bit further than that today if you asked him. The room, he got a standing ovation. And this is TED Med. This is not some random amalgam of strange people from the streets of San Francisco. This is a room full of medical professionals. And the fact that the consensus is turning in that direction should make us, like lay people, folks who, may read a scientific paper every once in a while. And I've read a few because I know Carl, and I've been working on a project with him, which I need more money to fund completely. But, I hope that we will start to open our minds a bit to say, maybe this isn't as bad as I thought, and perhaps a lot of the laws that are in place, because I thought it was so bad, need to be revisited. And that's the conversation I want to have. I want to have that conversation because I think there's empirical stuff that we can bring to bear. We can know this in a way that, as you said, we can't know about a lot of the racial stuff. It injects something else altogether into the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, any ism you can't gauge. Racism, homophobiaism, whatever. It's like you don't know if somebody's being prejudiced against you.
Yeah,
like you really don't.
Yeah.
Like you can't.
And more than that, though, I mean, you might also just start distorting the facts in order to suit your narrative.
Your narrative, yeah.
Which is what we have seen happen with the drug war and, in my opinion, with the police shooting stuff. Like, we are having that narrow conversation. There are people who won't.
There is a fear of blackness, though.
There are people who won't talk to me and won't engage me because I disagree with them on the importance of race in those conversations, which is silly.
There's a fear of blackness.
For this.
Yeah, let's talk about the fear of blackness.
I mean, we can't. There's a fear of blackness. There just is.
Because earlier,
and there is homophobia.
We were trying to talk like this. We were trying to talk about this, and then I don't know. It seemed like you didn't believe in this fear of blackness.
Well, I mean, earlier today when we were talking,
not all black people. Some.
Well, no, I mean, look,
there
you said culture, right? There are any number of things culturally that you can do to signal that you might be the sort of person.
Oh, there's scary white people too.
Yeah.
There's not scary Indians.
I don't know if that's true.
I know that for a fact.
I would absolutely be spooked if I saw an Indian.
I doubt.
You're saying you see an Indian and there's a part of you. No, those absolutely because you're watching a ghost. You're like, where the fuck have you been?
there are still some native.
No, but I feel like there are certain, and it is a cultural thing. You are making sense, right? So there'll be the cultural stereotypes that we have of Indians, of Asians to a certain extent, and of like kind of nerdy white people. You're not afraid of. Right, because you see them in movies, you see them in music, you see them in media.
Nope, I am absolutely afraid of the nerdy white guy nowadays.
Why?
Because Dylan Roof was a nerdy white guy, and that guy that shot up the movie theater was a nerdy white guy.
No. That's not nerdy white guy. That is like goth white kid.
That's nerdy.
That shit is frightening.
I mean, it's also,
totally okay.
It's also just people who have.
Dylan Roof had a bald haircut.
That's goth shit. That's
been a
fucking
Beatle.
Scary.
I don't know that it's goth. I think that's actually like in both cases like some sort of mental illness.
Okay, I mean I'm with you on the mental illness thing, but like the ostracized white groups.
We've seen black people and various other people have mental illness. The question is, what characteristic is it really that makes someone scary or
Dylan Roof wasn't mental illness though. Dylan Roof told us it was racism. Dylan Roof said he wanted to start a race war. Come on, you deal with logic. Look, you read the manifesto.
Just because you say it's something doesn't mean that you're not dealing with something. Like if you ask a crackhead, they could tell you that they're seeing fucking bats all over the place, but they're dealing.
He wrote it out though. He said I wanted to start a race war.
And it also doesn't mean though that most people who even hold similarly icky views, right, who think like white supremacy is cool, like most of them don't go shoot places up. In fact, if you looked at Stormfront, which is this website for white supremacists, like they were castigating Dylan Roof. Like they were distancing themselves from him because that is beyond the pale. That is not what we want. That's not what we do.
Yeah, but once again, people aren't a monolith.
Which I think is important. Yeah, but I mean, some people will commit violent crimes, and in some cases, I just don't know that.
And say it's on behalf of something.
Yes,
like all these people running around saying they're members of ISIS.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to attribute it to like some commonality that they have between them, like say whiteness, or even white supremacy, or as a more sort of perhaps useful modern example, like Islam. I don't know that it's enough for us to just talk about Islam. I think with terrorism in particular, like this whole Islamic, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, you can't see it, Islamic terror stuff, we conflate a lot of important
I
stuff
agree.
What do you
under
mean?
the umbrella of Islam.
I agree.
So there is a decades-long struggle in the Middle East between, say, Sunnis and Shias.
Sure.
And within that, there are struggles between various countries that have borders with one another.
Sure.
And various
Thanks,
groups
England.
who, like,
Thanks,
live
France.
inside of these places, like the Kurds,
Yeah.
who are our allies in Iraq and who are also our allies, kind of, sort of, it seems, on
yeah.
different days, in a place like Syria. It's complicated.
Yeah.
Like, we are arming people in certain parts of Syria that we think are our friends and our allies. And in other places, like 10 years later, 2 years later, it turns out they're not our friends anymore. So for me, like, if we talk about terrorism and we say, oh, it's Islam, it's Muslims, that doesn't give you a lot of information about all of those complicated dynamics that are happening under the surface.
Yes, but it narrows it down. Like, I think
it narrows it down, but it doesn't improve your understanding.
okay, it doesn't maybe improve your understanding of the situation, and we should all read and research to find out what we're dealing with. But I think when it comes to, like, the explosions in New York City that happened, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I was texting this to Charlemagne the other day. Like, we're, like, purposely naive for some weird fucking reason. Maybe it's white guilt. I don't know what it is. If a black guy gets hung from a tree, who did it?
Who knows?
A fucking white guy did it.
We'll
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Yeah,
If a kid gets shot, if a school gets shot up, a young fucking white kid did it. If somebody gets killed with, like, throwing stars and there's a fucking smoke cloud around it, I'm pretty sure an Asian probably did that.
Or a
fucking
Ninja
crime.
Turtle.
Okay.
Or a Ninja Turtle.
Ninja Turtle don't have stores. If it's a nunchuck, then
okay,
then we'll have
you're
to deal with
right, you're right,
Michelangelo.
you're right.
So we know more is like, now if some shit just gets blown up,
But you just
right?
said more. I
If
mean-
some shit just gets blown up. It's some crazy Muslims that did it. Now, that doesn't mean that all Muslims are bad people. It just means that's the bad part of Muslims do that blowing up shit for no reason.
I agree
thing.
with all your.
That's their thing.
I agree with all your stereotypes, and I agree with all your generalizations.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't make it factual. Because when
No. But it allows us to hone it allows us to hone the search.
Yeah.
And profiling does help in terms of honing search. If there is an explosion, a random bomb explosion that happens in a city, we can search 18 to 34-year-old Muslims. If there's a school shooting, we can search whatever 12 to 18-year-old white kids. Like, we can do these things at least going in with the lens. It doesn't make you bigoted. It doesn't make you stereotype. This is informed information.
that's dangerous, though.
But
That could be dangerous.
It's not.
You know what's
just
dangerous?
It's not
Having
just
shit get
dangerous.
blown up.
It's not just dangerous. It's imprudent. Like, this is, and
I
I'll
don't know
tell
what
you
that
why.
word means.
It
I thought
doesn't
that
make
was
sense.
insurance company.
That's what I was saying. I said, what was going on? Don't the New Jersey Nets play there? What the hell's happening?
I'll give you a specific example, right? The NSA. We know that they were doing this, like, really invasive.
You know what
broad,
they want you to know.
Broad.
Okay.
Yeah, we know what Edward Snowden told us.
Exactly.
That they were doing this broad surveillance of everyone, where they were collecting all of our phone.
I love it.
data.
Love that.
Right.
Huge supporter of that.
Here's what's interesting. We don't know that it helped them solve any crimes.
We also don't know that it didn't.
We actually don't have any evidence that it did.
But
And
we
I
don't
think-
know. Why would
Listen,
they give evidence?
Because
Why
they
would,
do it all the time.
But let me ask you this question.
No.
Let me just
listen,
ask you one question,
you
and
just-
then you go back.
All right, go ahead.
If I'm the NSA and I have this vast network that's searching emails and cell phones, right, where I'm actually finding out what terrorists are doing,
Except they're not.
but let me just put
Go
it out
for
there,
it.
hypothetically speaking,
Uh-huh.
why would I tell the terrorists that I have the technology to stop them, to monitor exactly what they're doing? What you do is you don't say shit and just stop it before it happens, like they've constantly been doing probably. There's probably attacks every single day that they thwart because of this information.
They would love you to believe that. That just isn't the case.
How do you know?
Because there is no evidence of it, and they routinely go out
I just
and
told
do-
you why there's no evidence.
No, I'm telling you that they go out and do PR tours. They will go on 60 Minutes and they will talk about various attacks that they have thwarted. They
That is true.
routinely release statistics about the various attacks that they've
Sick.
stopped. And most of those statistics
Yeah.
happen to be cases of something that looks a lot like entrapment.
They
where
did it this weekend.
they introduce the idea to the guy. The guy goes out and tries to carry out an attack, and it doesn't work because he was always working with members of the intelligence community all along. Would some of those people have turned out to be bad apples? Undoubtedly, some of them may have. But it's important to note that that is what's going on. And my issue with the NSA surveillance is this, that I think that we shouldn't just be looking at whether or not it's right for the government to surveil everyone. We should be looking about whether or not it's effective and whether or not it is the best thing that they could do. After 9/11, they said to us, look, we couldn't find that needle in a haystack. So they went and they piled the haystack higher. They piled the haystack higher with every piece of information they could find about every phone call you and I are making.
Dope.
That is not good intelligence.
I love it.
That is bad.
Why?
It is bad because it is a waste of money and resources, because if you're looking at that, you're not actually analyzing things that are likely to be the problem.
For example,
let's take the sniper in D.C.
Yep.
The presumption that that is a white guy who is off shooting people. It was talked about. There were people who were profilers, who came in and said, oh, it's probably a white guy. It turns out it's a Jamaican dude and his stepfather, his fake stepfather. That's a thing. It happens. There are, in fact, outliers. The Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah.
A white guy, a white nationalist, white supremacist. It's important to recognize that stuff. So I don't know.
So you have two outliers.
No, this is look.
Are you really comparing those two things to the amount of?
I'm definitely saying that in general, you might be right that overall, it is more than likely a particular person of a particular appearance and faith. But what I'm suggesting in reverse, what I'm giving back to you, is that conducting dragnet surveillance and conducting investigations by dragnet actually leads you to a lot of false positives. It produces an investigation that isn't particularly bright. You waste a lot of resources. And in the process, you almost certainly let people get away with things that they shouldn't. The fact that we have had a bunch of domestic terror attacks, not by people who were given intelligence by ISIS, but just lunatics in the United States who in some cases were on terror watch lists and they still managed to carry those attacks out, suggests to me that we aren't doing this the right way.
Yeah, you're not going to tell me that guy in Jersey this weekend wasn't on a terror watch list, bro.
I don't know if he was.
They say as of right now, he wasn't.
I don't know if he was or wasn't.
But this is important. We don't know.
Sure.
The guy previously was, though.
Yes, he was.
I can't remember his name.
What, the guy with the gay club in Orlando?
Yeah. He was on the watch.
Sure. But here's my thing: is what you're saying is all assuming that this hasn't worked out and they're not withholding information.
They could. You're very right.
So that's what I'm saying. If you're
they could
right,
be withholding information, and they would like us to believe. They would like us to believe that they have.
Because that's what I would do.
I'm telling you that they have come out and given us numbers, and that most of those numbers just aren't credible.
Sure, and that's fine.
And that's important.
That's fine. I personally feel
there has been reporting on this issue. Though,
Sure.
And the effectiveness of these programs, and the reporting on the effectiveness of these programs suggests that they have not been used to preemptively stop an attack. But even if they had one time, my contention is that it's unconstitutional. It's almost certainly not the most effective way to go about doing this.
Well, we don't know
and that. It presents any number of important dangers, because there is the possibility and potential for government abuse. And we just talked about absolute power and the fact that it corrupts. Absolutely. The reason I want to check the government, the reason I want to keep them boxed in is because COINTELPRO. Yeah, because they do bad stuff when they're not surveilled.
I don't see. I believe in like benevolent dictatorship.
That is nice. That is a fantasy.
I mean, that's what's not Singapore.
What do you mean?
I mean, Singapore, you take a fucking people who are living in the jungle 40 years ago, and now it's one of the most technologically advanced countries in the world because they have a benevolent dictatorship.
For now, at any point in time, you might be able to have a government. And I don't know much about Singapore.
Well, you got to keep it being benevolent. All I'm saying is,
I'm saying at any point in time,
illusion of freedom.
I'm
all about illusion of freedom. Yeah, look at my phone. Look at your phone. You want like freedom. Give everybody an opportunity. Fuck that shit. I don't look at my phone. Look at every time. Like I honestly bought. I bought just recently because I'm reading the Quran now, just kind of figure out what's going on. I bought that shit and I bought a Bible.
You're on a terror watch list now.
I literally pay with my credit card, and I started to think, fuck, am I in a thing now?
Yeah,
like, what's going on?
That's a good use of resources, right?
You're the prime example of a white guy who turns to ISIS.
Why would you say that, yo?
This guy bought a Quran.
Why would you say that?
He's about to pledge allegiance
Let me
to
tell
ISIS.
you something.
I've
been trying to read this book, and there is no way that that's going to convince me. It's going to take some other shit that's going to commit. Dude, 3 pages a night, and I'm fucking snoozing.
I feel like the best path forward.
I feel like the NSA is providing a false sense of security.
Yes.
With that. Like, that's all that is.
How do you? Here's my point. You guys are operating under the assumption that none of this technology has thwarted attacks.
A bomb went off this weekend.
You know nothing. You know nothing about it. I'm operating under the assumption that it has thwarted attacks that we don't know about, and they would actually rather, for peace sake, they'd rather us not know about the attacks that were thwarted because they don't want us living in this constant fear of the world's going to explode.
We already do.
The fact that they routinely talk to us about the various attacks they've thwarted.
They didn't talk to me.
And here again, we can actually go to like the data. and we ought to recognize.
What data is there of the things that they are purposely not telling us about?
I'm making a different point because I've already addressed that point. You don't like my answer. I can't do it.
No, it's not that I don't like it. It's just that you and I are both
using that. I'm start using. I'm letting you know that I'm gonna start using that.
Look, we
I've
just
already
disagree.
Addressed that point. You don't like my answer. Let's move.
I think we don't like each other's answers. I think that you're operating under the assumption that we're getting all the information from a secret organization, which is absolutely impossible.
It's not merely an assumption. There has been reporting on this.
You think you have all the information from the NSA?
I said it's not merely an assumption.
Okay.
There has been reporting on this, and we have gotten, the intelligence community has gone on the record and has routinely talked to us about plots that they have thwarted.
So you think there's nothing that is secret
I'm not saying that there's nothing that's secret. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying,
is it possible in the secret files, right? Is it possible in the secret files that there are attacks that were thwarted because of that?
It's possible. Let me give you this. It's even likely. That doesn't mean that it is the best and most efficient way to do it.
Sure, it could be more efficient, but currently
it seems like they tell us about every attack. It seems like they tell us about every attack, every potential attack.
Yeah, they do.
The terror alerts had red, whatever. Like,
which is Andrew's. Is the point that you're making, which I don't think is quite accurate. They talk to us about a lot of this stuff. But what I was going to say is, what I was going to say is this. I think in the same way that we do with drugs, because we are prone to hyperbole, because we are primates, and that's kind of what we do. Our reaction to the risks associated with terrorism are wildly out of proportion to the actual risks of us dying in terror attacks. And
that is a fact.
Posed by terrorists.
I agree with that.
And it's imperative that we be sane about it. And for that reason, again, I'm also disinclined to give the government arbitrary authority to spy on me. And look, whether you like Trump or Hillary, and I suspect most of the people listening prefer Hillary, I don't want either one of them to have carte blanche authority to go through my personal information, to use it against me under any premise, or even people who work there to have that sort of authority. There need to be checks and balances. For the same reason the cops need checks and balances and lapel pins, we need checks and balances on all forms of government power and authority. If you care about a cop, one cop on the street with a gun and what they might do wrong, then you ought to care about a bureaucrat who is in the highest office in the land and has the nuclear codes. That should matter. They do start frivolous wars. They kill people needlessly. And for all of the folks who are sort of proudly supporting Hillary and think, well, I'm not. Those Trump supporters are terrible and awful.
Who supports Hillary proudly?
Well, look, there are some who at least say that they have deep contempt for Trump supporters. It's worth noting that Hillary Clinton has a record, and her record on various issues is deplorable. It's deplorable on free speech. It's deplorable on foreign policy. You have two really awful choices between these two candidates.
Yep.
And
who you
I don't know.
for?
Can't be proud. Gary Johnson.
Libertarian
candidate.
I like Gary.
You like Gary?
I mean, I like him as a person.
This guy's a doofus.
I met him like 2 weeks ago. No,
this guy is a fucking doofus.
He had that one mishap with the
Aleppo.
With the
huge mishap.
And most people can't find Aleppo on the map. And the New York Times, when it wrote a story,
why didn't they just say Syria?
When the New York Times,
you could have said,
why didn't they just say Syria? Why would you have to be Aleppo?
It wasn't a look, and I don't think it was
a battleground.
I don't think it was a trick. I don't think it was a trick question, but it is a trick question.
He's supposed to know that.
The New York Times wrote a story afterwards.
Have you seen The Little Mermaid?
Two retractions.
Have you seen The Little Mermaid?
Two retractions.
Have you seen The Little Mermaid?
Yes.
Do you know the seagull Scuttle?
No, I didn't know that was his name. I know there's a seagull.
That's Gary Johnson.
No,
that goofy fucking seagull.
Gary Johnson is a
using a fork in his fucking hair.
Gary Johnson is a successful entrepreneur.
Yes.
He's a triathlete
in New Mexico.
He climbed a mountain with a broken leg. He's
an idiot. Good. So we have an idiot.
You know what made me like Gary?
And he smokes.
I watched the Libertarian town hall he did. And
which was atrocious, by the way.
It was not. It was good.
He
what did you see?
fucking bombed. Him and
what do you mean? Like rhetorically?
Bombed.
Rhetorically?
Literally, I don't know what do you mean by rhetorically.
Like the things
he did a horrible job.
Like the way they were saying the things.
Literally, the way he spoke. I mean, like I'm literally watching this, right? Because libertarians. This was your fucking election.
This is true.
It was like everybody sucked, and I'm literally sitting there going, because I like libertarian philosophy, and I find myself gravitating that way in a lot of regards. But I'm like, this is it. I wanted fucking Kennedy or somebody to run. I literally did. I was like somebody interesting, because you don't have to win. You just have to be interesting.
Gary's interesting, bro.
I think Gary's interesting.
He looks like he's snorkeling.
Listen,
he is pathetic. I was so embarrassed. And then this old fucking dude that he has next to him,
his VP running mate.
What is his name?
Bill Weld.
Bill Weld.
Yeah.
his face.
I think what
he had the most progressive answer on marijuana that I've heard from any candidate.
Which was what?
I don't even remember now.
Exactly.
But when I heard it,
but
it
no,
was
I mean,
great.
he's broadly
the ball ripped when I heard it.
He's broadly in favor of federalization. He's broadly in favor of not federalization, legalization for marijuana at the federal level, and he's broadly in favor of drug decriminalization.
How the fuck did this happen?
I don't think he's perfect.
You should have ran. You would have a better chance than fucking Gary Johnson.
You might be right.
Oh, this poor guy.
Maybe people feel like those positions don't mean anything anymore.
What?
Like the head of state.
It means something. It means a lot.
Like maybe some politicians feel like they can get more done from a local level or from the federal level they're at. Maybe they don't feel like head of state.
I just don't think we have many good politicians. And for libertarians, the truth is we don't have a deep bench of people who have public policy experience because they don't get elected a lot. They get elected at the local level. They don't really get elected to Congress or the Senate.
But now you don't need public policy experience.
But we had Gary Johnson, and Trump seems to be proving that, right? But what does Trump have? Trump has celebrity. So show me the really well-known, super prominent, uber billionaire libertarian. There aren't many of those either. So we don't necessarily have that option.
Some tech
You're going to
guy.
need to develop a bench.
What about a tech guy?
There are a few.
Okay, let's take a break for a second. We'd like to thank Squarespace once again for supporting this week's episode of Brilliant Idiots. Squarespace is here to help anyone build a beautiful online presence, a website, okay? By blending elegant design and sophisticated engineering, Squarespace empowers millions of people to share their stories with the world. From individual and local artists to entrepreneurs shaping the world's most iconic businesses, Squarespace makes creating and maintaining your website easy. Design a gorgeous online hub using Squarespace's award-winning templates, customizable settings, and more, all with a single plugin. Do you know what a plugin is? No. Do I know what it is? No. That's why we should be using Squarespace. We don't know about this shit. You can add and arrange your content with the click of a mouse. Do you use a mouse? Probably not. Probably got a laptop. Okay? But that's that pad part that you put your pointer finger on. Creating with Squarespace is simple and an intuitive process. I don't know what that word means either. And for savvy shop owners, Squarespace's seamless commerce tools allow you to understand every aspect of your business. Savvy shop owner, Squarespace's seamless commerce tools allow you to understand every aspect of your business. Track inventory, process orders, and send custom emails in one easy-to-use interface. Best of all, Squarespace offers 24/7 customer support. Every member of the customer care team is an experienced Squarespace user working in a Squarespace office, whether your problem is big, small, or just downright confusing. One of their team is always online and ready to assist you. So start your free trial today by going to squarespace.com and enter the offer code IDIOT to get 10% off your first purchase. Squarespace, set your website apart.
I'm about to post this picture with me and Gary right now.
Yeah,
Gary who?
I like
Gary Johnson.
You got a picture of Gary Johnson?
I like Gary. I saw it when I saw the Libertarian Town Hall, and I saw him. I was with Kennedy, and I'm like, why that dude look familiar? And I'm like, oh, that's Gary, the governor of New Mexico.
Yeah, who usually walked on set high when we would come to television with us.
So he was just chopping it up, having a conversation. I don't think he can win, but I like him.
No, dude, I really wish. Unfortunately, he won't be in the debate, the first debate. There's a chance that he could make it into the second if he gets to 15% in the polls. He's at something like 9 now. I hope he gets there. Look, I think the American people deserve other choices. They deserve to hear from people who have other perspectives. And if you dislike Republicans and you are not confident in Hillary Clinton and you want someone who's going to give you less stupid foreign wars, who's going to give you, broadly speaking, better policy on drugs, who cares about the Black Lives Matter issue. He talks about it in a way that I don't. He and I don't agree on that stuff. Gary Johnson is your dude. Like, it is ridiculous to vote for anyone else because I think it's the conflation of the race issue with the police reforms that we need. Like, we should talk about the police reforms, and we should not.
But and I also think it's members of the Black Lives Matter movement who specifically talk about police reform.
Some of them,
like somebody like DeRay, talks specifically about police reform. Has a 10-point plan for police reform.
Some of them.
Sean King talks about police reform. Like, I think that's what they all want is police reform.
But Sean King also I think there's also
He's
a bit of trolling there.
He's
too.
fucking awful.
There's a bit of
I wouldn't call it trolling, but I don't like constantly talking about the problem.
Yeah.
You don't have to constantly beat me in the head with who got shot,
He's
who got
single-handedly
killed. Give me some solutions.
responsible for people feeling like shit.
And
No,
I think
that's the police.
No,
That's the police, not
no. Because every day you don't have to deal with the police and they make you feel like shit. But every day you go on Sean King's Twitter and he goes, "Hey, it's horrible to be black.
Yeah.
Hey, just in case you were having
ridiculous.
Were you having a good day today?
Yeah.
It's horrible to be black.
And I think that is fine.
I don't like constant reminders.
But it's also
America gives me enough of those. There's no balance. Yeah, it's no balance.
But it's also
the great things.
There are plenty. And we live in a time when the sort of racism that was confronted by civil rights activists in the 1960s, that isn't a thing.
Of course not.
And it's worth noting that tremendous, amazing change that's happened, the radical shift that's given us a black president, 2 terms actually.
Yeah.
It's dangerous too, though.
Happen overnight.
Because it's not. I mean,
it happened virtually overnight. Is actually what I mean to say.
I think
nowhere else have we seen that sort of progress.
I think it's switched. I think that in the 60s it was so overt. I think it's a lot more covert now, because one of the illest things that I've seen that people don't acknowledge is when Biggie Smalls wore that T-shirt with the KKK members on it, and it said, "Some of these people are your neighborhood police officers," and that's the truth. Like, we don't know who in positions of power now is truly racist, or truly homophobic, or truly sexist.
Isn't that progress to show that they feel shamed? Like, we got people hiding out now.
They can't express their perspective.
No.
It's funner to fuck you when nobody knows you're fucking them.
Yeah, but that's just it. I don't.
Did you ever see Hollow Man when he was invisible?
Yeah, and he was fingering the girl.
What? She had no idea what was happening. She got her nipple rubbed. Like, what the fuck?
Was she enjoying it?
Enough.
She like
it was.
She was
Hollow Man enjoyed it,
but she didn't feel oppressed.
Hey, the next scene they showed Hollow Man looking in the mirror, putting cold water on his face with an ill smile. Like, he enjoyed it. If I can fuck you without you knowing I fucked you.
Yeah, but you know what? And so if I find the time, I'll finish my book proposal. And if I write it, there's sort of 2 things. The first, we talked about a bunch, that race often sort of confuses issues rather than illuminating them and making them easy to understand. The second is that, James Baldwin, who, famous, amazing, brilliant writer,
absolutely,
wrote The Fire Next Time. And most people know that book is about a race war that could happen if we don't get our house in order. And a lot of times people focus on the sort of warning to white people that there is something they need to do. But he had another warning for black folks as well, which was that it is possible that a people who have been sort of undermined and taken advantage of for long enough will lose the ability to tell between a real and imagined harm. And quite frankly, I think we find ourselves in a situation where we confront those sorts of things all the time, like Tawana Brawley, Duke Lacrosse, perhaps even in
outliers,
some shape or form, Ferguson.
Outliers.
Well, listen,
outliers.
But no, look, this is what I'm saying. I'm not saying that there aren't disparate socioeconomic outcomes for black people in this country. There are. I would argue that the causes and the solutions for those things are complicated with respect to the causes, and the solutions can be difficult to obtain. But those solutions are almost certainly race neutral. They don't have anything to do with race. And if you want to address inequalities in this country and improve people's lives in their communities, there are ways to go about it. But I don't know that, is there covert racism? Sure, maybe.
It's not a maybe.
But look, I'm just saying, but I don't even really want to.
Okay.
What I'm saying is, I don't know what you do about that.
Because saying it's no covert racism is saying racism doesn't exist.
I said maybe. I said maybe. And I'm just saying, I don't know what to do about that. What I do know is that if literacy is really, really low in black communities, and black kids tend to watch television at much higher rates than other kids, like, the issue isn't race. The issue is we got to do something about reading, and we've got to do something about fewer hours spent watching television. And I'm just giving you facts for the.
But what that got to do with somebody systemically killing me because of my race?
But this is what I'm saying. We can only speculate about whether or not.
Because whether I can read or not, somebody's still gonna hate me just because I'm black.
Maybe, but I'm still saying what we can only speculate about whether or not that particular killing happened because of systematic racism. Mm-hmm. What we can do, however, is put provisions in place to try to address police violence, try to address the drug war, try to address the inequalities that exist. And those policies aren't about whether or not someone is racist. They're about whether or not we're getting results. And for far too long, we want to
like you were saying earlier, you don't know if somebody's objective is to be racist. You can't define that, but you can define whether somebody can read or not.
We know what a real we know what real good.
So you're saying these problems are tangible and you can actually fix these, while these are speculative. Because
we can only speculate.
Even if somebody does kill you because they're racist, you have to get them to admit it, and they might not admit it.
And that's why with the police, it's not a. I mean, it is, to me, it is a race issue. But let's focus on constitutional rights being violated.
Yeah.
And that is the other reason black people get so upset, because it's never any justice done to these people that are violating our constitutional rights.
Well, this is true.
Paid administrative leave. Yes. The family will get a settlement, and then that'll be that.
And we've actually seen that in other places too. Other bureaucracies work in the same way. We had these rubber rooms in New York City for teachers that could not be fired because that they were protected by a bureaucracy that made it easier for them to be bad at their jobs. The same thing exists in police departments, and this is it's all government. And this is not government is bad. This is people who have power and aren't really accountable can get away with providing you with shitty services, dangerous services, things that you don't want. And we have to demand better. And I think, like I said, we could talk about the inequalities and educational outcomes and stuff. Is that racism? Is it systematic bias? I don't know. What I do know is what good looks like, and we're not at good right now.
Okay, something we were talking about earlier.
I got to get out of here because I got a meeting with white people. And,
I want to bring up this one thing. Then all right, because we were talking about this yesterday, and I'm starting to get the sense that our brains aren't just haven't evolved to deal with media like we have it currently. Meaning, like when we were in the forest or wherever we're living, every stereotype that we developed was based on our surroundings, right? I saw an animal and it attacked me. If I see another animal like that, I know to stay away from it. I see a tree and that shit gives me a rash. And I see another tree that looks like that, I stay away from it. But now we're inundated with images of black people doing this one thing and police killing this and then white people being racist and all these things that are creating this world that, like we've said earlier, is not statistically accurate.
We're dealing with human narratives instead of human nature.
Yes, that's perfect.
So we have these human narratives instead of human nature, but our brains can't decipher between it. When we see dash cam footage of a cop killing a black person, that isn't also met with dash cam footage of 100 interactions where a policeman does not kill a black person. Right. It's only met with that one image. So now my day is, oh shit, police kill black people. That's all they do, right? How much of that is what creates this view of the different races, right? And how much of that creates bias in terms of the way we treat them?
I don't know how much. I do think that it is a factor. Like we prefer, I don't remember the exact phrase that you use, but we prefer simple narratives. And while you're welcome to them and you'll find them, that simple narrative may or may not comport with what is actually true. And it may or may not help you get to a solution that is useful and actionable. And evolutionarily, we are prone to think about the bad stuff. And to think about the risks and imagine the worst possible outcomes. It's the reason why we exaggerate the risk of being shot by the cops and exaggerate the risk of being killed by terrorists. And we fail to recognize routinely that we live in the safest time in human history. Like, it is remarkable. We are wealthier than we've ever been. We live longer than we've ever lived. We have access to more stuff than we've ever had. And we are actually seeing for the first time, really, like global poverty drop. And people who live in the poorest parts of the world see their lot in life improve. There's a very high likelihood that trend continues. And I do think it's important to sort of balance the two things. I can't say, how much of it plays into this other thing.
Not how much, but isn't it, couldn't you make an argument that if I have an irrational fear of terrorism and I have an irrational fear of maybe the cops, right, that maybe I could have an irrational fear of black people, and maybe cops could also have an irrational fear of black people, and that could influence their policing of black people.
Why do y'all call it irrational fear, though? Like, it's just a fear. Like, I have an irrational need to win the lottery.
Well, I think he said,
I feel like one day I can win the lottery. That's irrational.
But
like, it's a 1 in a 4 in a
But we're taking away from the point, right? It's like what I'm trying to do is trying to give you a biological rationale for why black people are treated differently by the police. And not because some policeman is at his house going, I fucking hate black people every single day, but maybe a policeman literally is inundated with information about black people that is negative, more so than with white people, Indians, Chinese,
or maybe
etc.
that's just one variable. Maybe your variable is correct. Maybe racism is another variable that's correct. Like, it doesn't have to be just one thing.
Sure.
And it can't be just one thing.
For me, is most things are complicated.
Right.
And there isn't that one answer. And anytime you hear someone pushing that one narrative and not embracing that complexity, like, you should be skeptical.
They're not really, because they're not really listening.
Not really interested.
They're not paying attention. They're not really interested in actually fixing a problem. They're interested in pushing their narrative.
Yeah, they want to talk about it.
Struggle pimps.
Yeah.
All right, come on, give me information, man. Camille.
Oh, at Camille.
Camille. Fuck, I said Kamal. It's Camille.
Man.
It's Camille.
The second most famous Camille.
That's why black people say K-Dog.
It's at KMELE on Twitter. I spend my days at Freethink Media, and we are freethink.is or freethinkmedia.com. We produce new video content every week. It's actually sort of the same sort of stuff we were talking about, like this notion that we live in the best possible time in history. So we go out and we find great stories about people who are making the future. So
positive news.
Our first series is all about like human enhancement and the crazy, insane stuff that's happening with restoring people's sight, giving them exoskeletons to walk around the city in. And our next series is about the space race, and we've got a great one coming up after where we followed around 6 founders from Peter Thiel's Founders Fund portfolio. And they tell their story about the radical, crazy new startups that they're building, and how they will change people's lives. And it's not all just sort of just good things. We're doing a series on the drug war as well, but rather than focus on like drugs are bad and the drug war is worse, it's the science of the drug war. It's how much of what you think you know about drugs is actually true, versus just the house I live in style approach, which is important, but I don't think goes far enough. So, big ideas, frontiers of a changing world is sort of Ted meets Vice. So hopefully beautiful to watch and stimulates your mind a little bit too.
Who pays for this shit?
We do. Hopefully it will be a profitable enterprise.
K-Money.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go.
Not enough yet.
Hey, thank you for joining us today, man.
Peace, man.
Always,
we gotta have you
always
back.
enjoyed dialoguing with you. As always, if you listen to this podcast, you think we're smart, you think we're intelligent, you think we're brilliant, you're absolutely right. If you listen to this podcast and you think we're a couple idiots who don't know nothing, you're right too. It's the Brilliant Idiots Podcast. Thank you for listening.
Hey, I just want to say thank you, or we want to say thank you very much to Avion Tequila for sponsoring this week's episode of Brilliant Idiots. Avion Tequila is made by real people with true passion for their craft. They pride themselves on the art of creating beautifully inefficient tequila, okay? Inefficient tequila. All these efficient tequilas that you're drinking, bullocks. Bullocks? I think that's an English word. Anyway, sip on Avion neat or on the rocks. It makes a delicious top shelf margarita too. Share Avion with people who appreciate what they eat and drink, and we promise it will become theirs and your favorite ultra premium